On the morning of August 18th, 2025, a silence fell over Ouagadougou. But it was the kind of silence that follows thunder. In a move no African head of state had dared to take in generations, Captain Ibrahim Traoré ordered the expulsion of the entire United States Embassy from Burkina Faso. Not just the ambassador, not just a few staffers. Every flag, every seal, every signal of American presence was declared unwelcome. On the dusty streets outside the compound, soldiers took position, their boots firm in the soil. Inside, diplomats packed their belongings under the unrelenting Sahel sun. Overhead, the stars and stripes sagged in still air, awaiting their final descent. Why? Why now? And what would possess a poor, landlocked country, dependent on foreign aid for food, medicine, and schooling, to cut ties so dramatically with the world's most powerful nation? Some called it suicidal. Others whispered it was finally justice. But Traoré's voice, carried by radio and television, said this was not about retaliation. This was about reclaiming the right to speak for oneself. The right to name one's soldiers as defenders, not criminals. The right to choose freedom, even if it meant hardship. In a world where narratives are drafted in air-conditioned rooms far from the dust of Sahel villages, Traoré dared to ask, who has the right to define African reality? As reports of the expulsion flashed across global newsrooms, commentators rushed to frame the act as reckless. Some worried it would isolate Burkina Faso. Others believed it might inspire a movement. But inside the capital, something else stirred. People didn't speak of diplomacy. They spoke of dignity. For the first time in decades, the script wasn't coming from Geneva or Washington. It was being written in Ouagadougou. It began not with soldiers or speeches, but with ink on paper. A U.S. report arrived quietly in Ouagadougou, intended as just another assessment in the global churn of bureaucracy. But when Captain Ibrahim Traoré laid eyes on it, every word ignited something deeper. There, in stark language, Burkina armed forces, those fighting daily on Sahel front lines, were listed beside extremist groups. It was not criticism. It was condemnation, and it pierced straight through the heart of every soldier's sacrifice. In the presidential chamber, Traoré read the lines aloud to his ministers. His voice was steady, but his eyes burned. Our soldiers, he said, the ones who shield our villages, who die protecting our schools, now compared to the butchers of Arbinda. Silence followed. Then came the thud of his palm against the table. Did they forget the 2 million displaced since 2016? Did they not read the UN figures? 2,000 civilians dead last year? The room held its breath. For Traoré, this was not just a matter of insult. It was an act of narrative aggression. He summoned his communications director and gave a chilling order. Read it to the people. Let every mother who buried a son hear how America names him. That night, state television echoed with fury. Who gave Washington the right, the anchor asked, to define our dignity? In the barracks of Kaya, young soldiers watched in silence, fists clenched. One murmured, "So our captain was right. They call us criminals." Another added bitterly, "They did not see Jibo. They never saw Yaga." In those remote towns, Burkinan soldiers had fought, sometimes alone, against jihadist raids, protecting children and elders under impossible odds. Yet from across the ocean, their deaths were reduced to footnotes in a sterile report. The backlash grew quickly. Placards emerged in the streets. Sovereignty is not for sale. In mosques, churches, and markets, the question rippled. How long would they let others speak for them? On the balcony of the presidential palace, Traoré faced the crowd. "They say your sons are abusers," he cried, "but I say they are guardians. They fall so you may rise." The response was thunderous. In the midst of this, an advisor warned him privately. "Captain, America provides vital support, schools, clinics, food." But Traoré's reply was unflinching. If bread is offered with chains, it is not help, it is humiliation. Behind closed doors, ministers debated the implications. What would happen to rural health programs? What about the agriculture projects or teacher salaries tied to Western funding? Traore stood firm. A nation raised on dependency, he said, will never stand on its own feet. Then came the fateful decision. The entire United States Embassy, not just individuals, was declared unwelcome. Troops were deployed to the boulevard. Embassy staff packed their belongings. Overhead, the stars and stripes waited to be lowered. The announcement echoed across radio stations. The embassy must vacate within 72 hours. Outside, the crowd swelled. Women ululated. Youth waved flags. Veterans raised their crutches. And from the rooftops, a new chant broke through the dusk air. We are poor, but we are free. The symbolism was undeniable. For decades, that embassy represented more than diplomacy. It was a symbol of leverage, of expectations quietly imposed, of compliance quietly extracted. Now, Traore had snapped that cord. Inside cabinet halls, concerns persisted. One minister noted the risk. We may lose over $100 million in annual assistance. But Traore's response came like steel. A classroom built on submission teaches slavery. A hospital funded through insult heals nothing. The press called it defiance. Foreign analysts labeled it reckless. Yet within Burkina Faso, something deeper stirred. A new authorship. No longer would foreign reports decide who was hero or villain. The Sahel's narrative, long dictated by distant powers, was being reclaimed by those who bled in its dust. And so, as the American flag descended and the embassy gates sealed, the people watched not with fear, but with a solemn kind of pride. The script was no longer being faxed from Washington. It was being written, line by line, in the red earth of Ouagadougou. When the final order was signed at midday, it was more than a line on paper. It was a break in the established rhythm of power. By evening, every radio in Burkina Faso echoed the same message. The United States Embassy was officially declared unwelcome, and all personnel had 72 hours to depart. The wording was clear. No exceptions, no delays. As twilight fell, crowds surged toward the gates, their chants rising in waves. Sovereignty is not for sale, they shouted, as if reclaiming a voice long denied. Women wept. Elders prayed. Youths climbed barriers to wave the national flag higher. Marines stepped forward to lower the American banner, their movements mechanical, their expressions unreadable. And in that heavy silence, it was not just a flag descending. It was an era folding itself into a box. Inside the palace, Captain Traoré convened his ministers for one final review. The foreign minister hesitated, voice low. This action has no precedent. The Americans will retaliate. Are we prepared? Traoré leaned forward, palm striking the table with conviction. Prepared? We are already bleeding. 2,000 of our people died last year. 2 million have no homes. And yet they compare our soldiers to murderers. Tell me, what cost is higher than silence? That night, he addressed the nation on television. His voice was unwavering. We are not expelling a building, he declared. We are expelling an attitude. Aid without respect is bondage. Partnership without dignity is fraud. Even if we stand alone, we stand as a nation, not as a colony. The streets erupted in applause. Outside the city, in remote villages like Dori and Jibo, the message reached transistor radios, and families sat quietly, absorbing its weight. In one square, a war veteran raised his fist and shouted, "We buried too many sons to kneel again." Across oceans, the impact was instant. In Washington, the State Department lit up with urgency. A top official declared it diplomatic suicide. Headlines rolled across news networks. Burkina Faso risks collapse. U.S. aid cut imminent. Analysts warned that hundreds of millions in health and security support might vanish. In Paris, editorials painted grim futures. In Brussels, statements dripped with caution. But not all responded with threats. In Moscow, commentators hailed Traoré as a lion of sovereignty. On state television, Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov addressed the globe saying, This is not madness. This is emancipation. Africa is showing it will not bow. In Ankara, Turkey pledged to expand schools and hospitals in the Sahel. A spokesman insisted, Burkina Faso is not isolated. It is choosing its allies. In Beijing, the foreign ministry remained silent, but quietly sent envoys offering humanitarian aid and infrastructure support, no strings attached. Their message was simple. We do not interfere, we partner. Inside the presidential palace, Traore reflected on these reactions. One aide asked if Burkina Faso should align with Russia. He shook his head slowly. Our dignity is not for rent. We will not trade one leash for another. As diplomatic shockwaves spread, Traore's focus remained internal. Ministers worried about clinics losing medicine, schools losing funding. Already, one warned, 6,000 classrooms have shut down due to insecurity. If aid disappears completely, what will we teach? Traore's answer was quiet, but firm. If a classroom is built on submission, it is not education. Better one day without lessons than a lifetime learning to kneel. Even beyond politics, the people echoed him. In a refugee camp outside Ouahigouya, a child tugged on Traore's arm and asked, Captain, will we have enough to eat? He knelt beside the boy and whispered, maybe less food today, but more freedom tomorrow. And freedom feeds longer than bread. That moment, captured by a passing journalist, swept across the nation. Radios replayed it. Markets buzzed with the quote. And the people, though afraid, though uncertain, stood a little straighter. The embassy gates were locked now. The stars and stripes had vanished. And in their place, the AES flag rose, held by students whose voices cracked from chanting, Africa Rise. It was no longer just a diplomatic act. It was a storm of meaning. The question had moved beyond embassies and into the soul of a continent. Will Africa choose its dignity, even if the price is steep? The morning after the embassy gates shut, Ouagadougou awoke to a new reality. Not of gunfire or confrontation, but of uncertainty that wrapped itself around every street corner, every household, and every whispered conversation. In open-air markets, women worried aloud whether imported grains would still arrive. In hospital corridors, doctors quietly counted dwindling boxes of antibiotics, their concern unspoken but visible. For years, American aid had flowed not just into politics, but into the very veins of daily life, funding clinics, equipping classrooms, subsidizing food for fragile provinces. Now, that lifeline hung by a thread. Inside the council chamber, the tone shifted from defiant to cautious. Ministers voiced their fears, some louder than others. One stood and said, Captain, if the Americans follow through, our education system could collapse. We've already lost thousands of classrooms to conflict. What happens if the rest close due to funding? Another added, agricultural subsidies are on hold. If seeds are not distributed in time, next season's harvest will be lost. Traore did not dismiss their concerns. He listened carefully, allowing silence to stretch before he spoke. We must ask ourselves, he said slowly, if a school teaches subservience, is it a place of learning or indoctrination? Is a clinic that heals only under foreign permission truly a place of care? The room remained still. No one had answers. But outside, the people had begun answering in their own way. In Kaya, a midwife told a local reporter, Let the medicines run out. I would rather deliver with bare hands than treat women whose dignity has been sold. In Saba, a farmer whose land had been fertilized with American assistance said, If I eat today and bow forever, I would rather go hungry and stand upright. These were not rehearsed lines. They were lived truths. The civil unrest many had predicted did not erupt, not immediately. Instead, what rose was something quieter, but more resolute, a collective tightening of will. University students began organizing free literacy workshops to keep learning alive. Local radio stations launched donation campaigns for medicine drives. Religious leaders called for days of fasting and prayer, not for aid to return, but for the strength to endure without it. Still, the pressure was real. International banks began reassessing risk exposure in Burkina Faso. Some halted disbursements. NGOs feared losing their operational licenses if they accepted funding from blacklisted partners. Western embassies issued travel advisories, warning citizens of instability. But instability did not come from the people. It came from the panic of systems that had relied too heavily on one narrative: that Africans must always depend. And now, that story was being rewritten. Politically, the tremors shook the region. In Mali and Niger, leaders watched closely. Their governments had already expelled French troops in 2023, but none had yet taken steps as dramatic as ejecting a whole embassy. Now, under the AES flag, whispers of coordinated sovereignty began to surface. Could the Sahel create a new development pact outside the Western aid ecosystem? Traore convened his military council, and the mood there was graver. Generals warned of equipment shortages, fuel limitations, intelligence gaps. How will we fight jihadists without American logistics? One asked. Traore stood slowly, letting his gaze settle on each of them. They gave us rifles, but silenced our tongues. They provided medicine, but poisoned our confidence. If Russia can send tools without humiliation, if China can build roads without lectures, why must we remain loyal to those who despise us? No one replied, but the unspoken answer circled the room like smoke. Across the nation, families struggled, but their voices did not cry out for reversal. Instead, they found ways to adapt. In the town of Titao, retired soldiers began tutoring local children. In Banfora, a group of seamstresses pooled money to support an orphanage that had lost foreign funding. The hardship was evident, but so was the awakening. The greatest shift was not economic, it was psychological. A line had been drawn, and while the consequences were steep, so too was the pride that came with choosing them. And then came the murals. On city walls, artists painted the American flag being lowered and the AES banner rising above it. Beneath, the words were simple: "We may have little, but it is ours." These images spread faster than official statements, becoming symbols of a people who had chosen hunger over humiliation, strain over surrender. The political cost was high. But in the hearts of many Burkinans, for the first time in years, they felt something deeper than uncertainty. They felt ownership. Across oceans and continents, the expulsion of the U.S. Embassy sent a tremor through the halls of power. In Washington, the reaction was swift and unforgiving. Inside the State Department's Situation Room, screens glowed with footage of the American flag being lowered in Ouagadougou, and voices grew sharp. "This is not a dispute," a senior aide warned. "This is a rupture." The Secretary of State ordered an immediate statement condemning the act as diplomatic suicide, threatening suspension of all assistance and warning other nations against following Burkina Faso's example. Senators held emergency hearings, grilling experts with a single anxious question: if one small nation can cast us out, how many others will dare? In the media, headlines blared with warnings of collapse, famine, and isolation, framing the decision as reckless nationalism. Yet not all voices agreed. A few commentators on independent networks argued that perhaps this was less about insanity and more about a long-suppressed demand for respect. In Paris, the tone was colder. French officials, still reeling from their 2023 troop withdrawals across the Sahel, called Traoré's move incendiary. Editorials labeled him a dangerous populist lighting a match in a region already on edge. Brussels took a more cautious approach, releasing carefully worded statements that warned of deteriorating cooperation but stopped short of direct condemnation. Meanwhile, Moscow seized the moment. On Russian state media, Traoré was hailed as the young lion of sovereignty, a symbol of resistance against neo-colonial interference. Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov publicly praised Burkina Faso's courage, declaring that Africa was finally taking ownership of its destiny. But when an aide in Ouagadougou asked Traoré whether they should align with Russia, his reply was measured and sharp. "Let them speak," he said, "but our dignity is not for rent. We are not swapping one master for another." In Beijing, the Chinese Foreign Ministry said little, but behind closed doors, envoys were dispatched with offers of medical aid, engineering support, and infrastructure projects. Their approach was deliberate. No cameras, no lectures, only quiet partnership. "We do not interfere," the message read. "We cooperate." In Ankara, Turkey responded with uncharacteristic speed, pledging expanded humanitarian missions across the Sahel and publicly declaring that Burkina Faso was not alone. Through these reactions, a global divide became visible. Some saw madness, others saw emancipation. But all understood one thing clearly. Traoré's move had redrawn the map of African diplomacy. As the echoes of chanting faded from the streets of Ouagadougou, what remained was not certainty, but an ache that pulsed through the Sahel like heat rising from scorched earth. Traoré stood on the balcony of the presidential palace, watching two images unfold side by side, one fading, the other rising. The American flag, once a symbol of order and global partnership, had been lowered into silence. The AES banner, carried by cracked voices and blistered hands, fluttered defiantly above the crowd. "Do you see?" he murmured to his aides. "We are not burying ourselves. We are planning something that will outlive us." But beneath that hope lay an undeniable question. Was this the first page of freedom or the opening lines of isolation? In the days that followed, murals appeared on city walls, not as slogans, but as scriptures of identity. They read, "We may have little, but it is ours." Radio stations repeated a new anthem, simple but thunderous. "Sovereignty is not for sale." Yet far from the pride and poetry, the world watched with a sharpened lens. In think tanks and foreign ministries, the conversation shifted. If Burkina Faso could do this, could others follow? And if so, would the pillars of Western diplomacy begin to tremble? The fear was not in Traoré's defiance, but in its resonance. In refugee camps, farmers' fields, and broken classrooms, people spoke the same refrain. Better hunger with dignity than comfort in chains. But the burden ahead remains real. International funding is drying. Food insecurity will grow. Healthcare access may fracture. And for every banner raised, another supply shipment may be lost. The question is not whether Traoré made history. He has. The question is whether his people can survive its consequences, and whether the world will allow Africa to define its path without punishment. Because sovereignty, dignity, and awakening are not slogans. They are survival. And survival, when stripped of self-respect, is nothing more than a managed extinction. On the dusty streets where students still chant and elders still stand with tear-stained pride, the message is clear. We are no longer bowing, we are deciding. So now, a question turns to you, watching, reading, listening from wherever you are. Do you believe a nation should choose food or freedom? And if you were standing in Ouagadougou today, would you kneel for aid or walk hungry, head held high? Please share if you believe dignity is not for sale. Subscribe if you feel sovereignty begins with voice.